Welcome to IGS 10-minute lecture series. This series is brought by the IGS department. IGS stands for Integrated Global Studies. In this series, a professor from the department will give you a mini lecture about her or his research area.
Most of us spend hours a day on digital platforms, scrolling past videos in seconds, leaving comments under posts about events we never lived through, and joining hashtags because everyone else has. These are some of the most ordinary things we do online. And over the next 10 minutes, I want to suggest that they are also, in ways we are only beginning to understand, issues of peace and conflict. Hello, my name is John Lee Candelaria. I am assistant professor here at the Department of Integrated Global Studies. The question that runs through my research, teaching, and in this short lecture is straightforward. What role do digital platforms play in shaping how societies live with one another? When most people hear the word peace, they think of the absence of war between countries. Diplomacy and international relations have long worked with this understanding, and it remains essential. Peace and conflict studies has built outward from there over the past several decades, developing a richer account of what peace requires. We now understand peace as something that has to be built and maintained in the textures of everyday life, in how communities remember violence, debate justice, raise their children, and disagree about the past. Communication sits at the center of all these activities, the channels through which people speak to one another, including newspapers, television, radio, and everyday conversations, can either escalate conflict or open paths toward peace and reconciliation. And these platforms have been studied with this question in mind for many decades. Today, much of that communication happens on digital platforms. YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter or X, Instagram. These are the infrastructures through which we now remember wars, contest histories, mourn the dead, and argue for justice. The kind of inquiry I want to share with you today takes that fact seriously and asks what becomes of public communication around conflict and coexistence once it runs through algorithms, recommendation systems, and the design choices decided for us by platform companies. Let me show you what I mean with a case from a country where I come from. In the Philippines, the Marcos family ruled the country during a period of dictatorship that lasted from 1972 to 1986, a period in which tens of thousands of people were detained, tortured, disappeared, or killed. The economy collapsed under enormous debt, and independent journalism was suppressed. Historians and survivors have documented these facts in extensive detail. And for decades, that documentation was the version of the dictatorship that school children in the Philippines learned. In the years leading up to the 2022 presidential election, something else happened on platforms like YouTube and TikTok. Videos began circulating that reframed the Marcos period as a golden age of national prosperity and order, depicting the family in this soft, nostalgic light. These videos were brief, emotionally vivid, and shared in enormous numbers. They did political work that long-form journalism and historical scholarship could not undo. In 2022, the dictator's son was elected president. I tell this story to make a specific analytical point. The platforms involved here are active participants of the politics of memory. Their design choices, including the short form video format, the algorithm that recommends content based on what you have watched previously, and the metrics of virality, gave certain kinds of historical claims the power that it would not have had we been still using the same traditional media that we used before. A society's relationship with its contentious past and its history of violence runs through these choices. When we cannot agree on what happened, we struggle to prevent its return. That is a peace and conflict issue in its sharpest form. The story I just told sits at one end of what platforms do. The same infrastructures sustain other kinds of work. And any honest account of digital platforms in the politics of peace has to look at both ends. Stay with the Philippines for a moment, since the most instructive counterpoint runs through the same political terrain. Alongside the TikTok and YouTube content that rehabilitated the Marcos period, a different ecology of digital projects has grown up to preserve what that content sought to erase. Bantayog ng mga bayani, or the Monument to Heroes, maintains an online wall of remembrance for those killed, tortured, or disappeared under the dictatorship. The Martial Law Chronicles Project and the online Martial Law Museum host extensive archives of survivor testimony and historical materials. YouTube channels run by historians, survivors, and advocates carry long-form interviews into the same recommendation systems that distribute the revisionist content. What makes this ecology distinctive is its reach beyond Philippine borders. Diaspora communities across North America, Europe, East Asia keep martial law memory active across generations, and academic institutions outside the Philippines integrate these materials into their teaching. Hashtag campaigns like hashtag Never Again and hashtag Marcos Not a Hero mobilize younger users to confront revisionism where it appears in their own feeds. This is the other side of the same infrastructure. The platforms that accelerated historical revisionism in one register here support a counter mobilization of memory, which holds historical violence accountable and refuses its forgetting. Any serious analysis of digital platforms in this context has to take both sides, both faces seriously, since the analytical and ethical questions cannot be answered if we only look at the one side. The two cases share a central feature worth dwelling on. In both, a digital platform serves as the infrastructure through which a society works out its relationship to violence in the past, whether to deny it, debate it, mourn it, or seek justice for it. In both, the design features of the platform, including its algorithms, its preferred formats, and its metrics of attention, actively shape what becomes visible and what fades from view. In both, ordinary users, including each of us, participate in a politics of memory, whether or not we recognize it as such. This is the kind of inquiry where my research lives in. 4 questions, in particular, come back across nearly every project. How do algorithms shape what societies remember and what they forget? What does responsible online speech look like during armed conflict or political crisis? What would it take to govern platforms in ways that support peace? And in the most immediate sense, how do we as users learn to read our own feeds with the critical attention these spaces deserve? These questions carry direct stakes for public life. The decisions made by platform companies, the practices that take hold among users, and the public arguments we have about both shape the conditions under which peace becomes possible in our time. Anyone who scrolls through a feed participates in that infrastructure, and the point of careful study is to participate in it with eyes open. Digital platforms have become consequential sites where societies work out their conflicts and pursue their peace. And they deserve the same careful attention that we give to news media, to schools, courts, and other institutions. And all of these shape how societies live together. At IGS, we approach questions like these through training that crosses fields, takes regional context seriously, and asks students to think carefully across the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences. The question of how we live together in a platform-saturated and mediated world is one that anyone with a phone in their pocket has a stake in. You have already started doing the work simply by watching this video. Thank you for listening.